Hi guys, welcome to this episode of Qigong. Again, I have to do it outside because I'm out of town right now. So let's get started. All right. Questions from Carl. Carl Roy G 14144. Hey Carl. Thank you, Adam, for always clarifying so many things related to the Qigong practice. You're very welcome. I have always been puzzled by the CCP's influence on Qigong practices and martial art. During the so-called Cultural Revolution, many masters were ridiculed, tortured, and killed. Many even had to flee mainland China in order to survive. Some fled to Taiwan and others to the West. Yeah. My grandfather used to talk about this a lot. To what extent had this affected internal traditions? I am aware that this might be a sensible topic to be discussed in a public forum, but I think it might be interesting to know how this, I can talk a little bit about it, but we're gonna maybe not go as deep as I want to because it is a public domain. And a few years ago, during the protests against China in Vancouver, I was on the news because I was part of the protest. And the next day, my Facebook was hacked and I got some threats. And so I realized, the internet's the internet, right? So, okay, so let me do the little bit of an internet version of this. So, like one of my teachers in each one is Zheng Xifeng, who was the grand student of the founder of each one, Wang Hingzai. His teacher, Yu Zhongfen, the student of Wang Hingzai, the best student of Wang Hingzai, went to prison for 8 years he got caught for teaching push hands in a park. So that should give you some context of how serious things were at that time, because China was a third world country. They got attacked by 8 countries, and they were dividing China into different sections. Very humiliating. After the Opium War, Hong Kong was signed to Britain. Can you imagine your country being attacked by 8 countries and they're chopping it up in different sections and your own people become second-class citizens? So that was the background. So when the Communist Party took over, they had a huge grudge, right? Obviously. So they overcompensated a bit. They wanted to modernize modernize China. So they're over-compromising, over-correcting, overreacting, became a little violent, right? They want to destroy anything that was ancient. And they blame all of China's backward third world stuff that caused it to be attacked by 8 countries. They blame everything on ancient Chinese culture. So they try to destroy it. They're burning Buddhist temple, burning Taoist temple, arresting monks, burning books, killing and burning and torturing monks and nuns, anything spiritual. They were trying to destroy it. Martial arts, they blame it on martial artists because if you remember during the boxing rebellion, all the Kung Fu people in China attacked, right? A lot of them. And throughout the dynasties in China, the Kung Fu people were responsible for the rebellions. So the people in control didn't like that. So they were starting to execute martial artists as well. So it got pretty bad. And that's just martial and Qigong. Never mind other tradition that at that time they were burning and destroying. But because we're talking about Qigong today, I'll stick to that. So, and all this is true, even though you probably can't find it on a lot of information on the internet because they did a really good job cleaning up. But my grandfather used to talk about this from a first-person perspective, right? So, in Qigong, classically speaking, actually, Qigong is actually a communist term. It was never called Qigong until these practices. Original Taoism was based on 3 center. The first one, the lower center, is to gain physical energy, to make you extremely strong physically. After you have that, you go on to the second and third center where you have spirituality, healing your emotional trauma, making you extremely blissful, peaceful, and happy. Once you have surpassed that point, you go to your physical center and you merge with the Tao. That's where spirituality actually happened. When you discover your true self, when you taste the energy behind what made up matter. Because they were destroying anything that was spiritual, they didn't want people to do any work with these two spiritual centers. But they left this physical part because it's physical exercise. So anything to do with these two, they made it illegal and started killing people that were practicing it. Anything to do with the lower center, they kept it legal as physical exercise, rebranded, and the Communist Party call it Qi Gong. That's where the term comes from. It's actually not an accurate term. In the ancient time, this one was Qi Gong, that term never exists. The lower burner, the physical fatality practice, was called Yang San Gong. Yang means to nourish in Chinese, San means the body, and Gong means the work. And these two centers was called Dou Sut. Dou means the Tao, and Sut means the art or the way in the Zhou dynasty. It was also called Po Yat, which means to embrace the one, the Tao. It was also called Sao Yat, which means to guard the one, the Tao. It was also called Zhou Mong, which means to sit and forget. And that's the original Zhou dynasty term. And then, of course, in the Ming dynasty, Han dynasty, Qin dynasty, a different term. Maybe on a different episode I'll talk about it, but that's the gist of it, right? In terms of martial art, it was even worse. Bruce Lee, for example, who was big on history, contrary to popular belief. One of my teachers was Jesse Glover, who was the first and arguably the best student of Bruce Lee. I had a chance to study with Jesse briefly, and Jesse said Bruce told him that during the Boxing Rebellion, a lot of Chinese martial art went extinct because they were killed during the Boxing Rebellion, the best Kung Fu guys. And what happened when the communists took over is they didn't want the people to know how to fight. So what they did is they took Chinese Kung Fu, right? They started killing these guys off. The ones that were left, they only allowed them to teach the forms, not the combat application. They mixed it with Chinese opera, which is like pretty much like Circus du Soleil. They can do front flip, back flip. It's basically gymnastics with opera singing, with folk dancing. They took all this stuff and then they turned it into some kind of performance art, which you can call contemporary wushu. You can see that online everywhere. What Jet Li does, it's like a nice sport, but it's got nothing to do with combat because they took the forms, took out all the application, added dancing and singing and all that stuff to it. It's a complete insult to Chinese culture, right? And that's what we see nowadays. And then by the late 1970s and early 1980s, China felt so insulted that they couldn't fight. Every time a Kung Fu guy went on stage, you get the crap beat out of him. What do you expect when all they know is forms and dancing and singing? So they started to add kickboxing into it, give it a Chinese flavor by adding shui jiao, Chinese wrestling, and call it sanda, which is freestyle fighting. So basically kickboxing mixed with Chinese wrestling, mixed with Chinese Kung Fu forms, folk dancing, and opera singing, they melted together and called it Kung Fu. And that's what the Communist Party did. So when people say Chinese martial art don't work, I'm like, well, you don't know the history. There's a reason why it doesn't work, right? I can talk about this all day, but it's starting to turn negative, so I'll keep it short. Now in mainland China, they started to change it. Even though they were burning and destroying and killing and torturing all the monks, they started to realize they could make a lot of money out of this. So they took the Shaolin Temple, the Wudan Temple, the Kulin Temple, all the Buddhist temple now, they turn it into Disneyland. It's basically a tourist attraction. Most of the head monks are gone. Any real monks are not there anymore. They don't even know any Kung Fu. They just know the opera singing with the backflip, front flip circus stuff, and they call it Kung Fu. They don't know how to really practice Zen or meditating anymore. It's more like a circus. It's more as a tourist attraction, right? But real practice of Qigong and Kung Fu still exists in China and outside of China and Hong Kong, Taiwan, and every Chinatown around the world. Because like you said, most of them has escaped. So it's still around. You cannot kill it. Doesn't matter how much they try to burn it or torture it. You can't kill Kung Fu guys. You can't kill us Qigong guys. We always practice underground. This has happened in every dynasty. The people will always find a way to practice because it reduces suffering. In the sense of the Qigong I practice, I learned it from the main lineage that I'm practicing around, the Heaven Mountain. I learned it from Master Stu Smith, who learned it from Grandmaster Fukien. And Grandmaster Fukien was part of the Red Boat Opera. When he was performing in San Francisco, Seattle area, he jumped ship and never returned to China. That's an example of escaping from the government, right? And how the art survived. Anyways, please leave your message below. I'll talk about it some more in future episodes. And if you're interested in training with me, everything I talk about, we practice. The Qigong, it is in my live Qigong program in adamchenlive.com. You can read about it and follow the link below in the description below this video. All right, guys, see you next time.